It started like any other day on the outer edge of the galactic empire. The sky was filled with the endless black of space, dotted with tiny specks of distant stars, and the patrol ships glided silently, keeping watch over their vast territory. These regions were thought to be safe, places where no one could penetrate without the Empire knowing. Every ship, every asteroid, and even the invisible lines of energy that formed the Empire's defenses were carefully monitored. It was supposed to be impossible for anyone to slip through undetected, and yet that day something happened that nobody could have imagined. The alert first came from a radar operator who noticed a small blip moving across the screen. At first it seemed ordinary, almost like a routine cargo shuttle straying off course. But the blip didn't behave like any ship the Empire had ever cataloged. It moved too fast, too smoothly, slipping past multiple detection fields as if they weren't even there. The operator double-checked the readings, thinking it must be a malfunction. Machines sometimes made mistakes, after all. But when the blip continued to accelerate through layer after layer of defenses, there was no longer any doubt. Something or someone was moving through the Empire's outer borders without permission. Soon the message reached the command ship, and the calm monitoring center turned into a storm of panic. Officers rushed to their stations, shouting numbers and orders at one another. The radar feeds, once just lines and dots on a screen, now showed something unbelievable. A human battleship. A single human battleship. Nobody could understand how it had gotten there. Humans were considered primitive, their technology centuries behind the Empire's. They had been observed for generations, and they were thought to be harmless, almost amusing in their small achievements compared to the might of the Empire. And yet, here was proof that they had somehow built a ship capable of slipping past the Empire's most advanced defenses. The initial disbelief quickly turned into fear. The commander of the patrol fleet slammed his fist on the table and demanded explanations. "How is this possible?" he shouted. "We have shields, traps, sensors, everything. No one passes through these barriers without our knowledge. And now a human ship is inside our territory. How?" Officers tried to give answers, but there were none. The data showed no trace of stealth technology like the Empire's, no known warp methods, nothing. The human ship had simply appeared, moved through every barrier, and continued its course as if nothing existed to stop it. As the hours passed, more details came in. The ship was not just surviving the defenses, it was moving with speed and precision that rivaled the Empire's own warships. Every attempt to track it seemed to fail. Visual scans, infrared sensors, quantum detection arrays. Nothing could lock onto it for long. The Empire had built these defenses with the assumption that no ship, not even the fastest, could pass them without leaving a trace. And yet here was proof that their assumptions were wrong. The thought alone shook every officer, scientist, and soldier who saw the readings. Inside the command center, a quiet tension began to grow. Not the kind that comes from routine danger or battle, but the kind that comes when people realize the world they thought they understood is suddenly different. The patrol officers exchanged worried glances. The generals whispered to one another, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. And through all of it, the human ship moved steadily, confidently, almost as if it knew it was untouchable. The Empire had always believed that humans were limited in their understanding of space. Their weapons were simple, their ships weak, and their minds predictable. Every encounter so far had confirmed that belief. Even when humans had built small colonies on distant planets, the Empire had monitored them and found nothing threatening. And now everything changed. One small human ship, unarmed or at least appearing unarmed, had bypassed centuries of careful planning and the most advanced defenses in the galaxy. It was a message, whether intentional or not. Humans were not to be underestimated. The news spread quickly throughout the patrol fleet. Other ships were ordered to join the search to track this mysterious intruder. But even as they moved, they found themselves unable to catch up. The human battleship did not rush or flee. It moved at its own pace, confident, calm, almost serene. Watching it, the Empire's officers could not help but feel a strange mix of fear and admiration. This was no random act of luck or accident. Someone had designed this ship with careful thought, skill, and knowledge far beyond what the Empire expected from humans. As panic grew, the story of the human ship began to circulate among the rank and file. Soldiers whispered about what this could mean, imagining possibilities that were more frightening than any battle they had ever faced. Some suggested it was a secret experiment, a stolen Empire technology hidden on a human world. Others feared it was a sign of a new kind of warfare, one that no one in the Empire could predict or stop. The higher-ups, trying to maintain control, ordered calm, but inside the halls of command, even the most disciplined officers admitted to themselves that the situation was unlike anything they had encountered. Meanwhile, the human ship continued its path through the Empire's space untouched and unstoppable. It passed through the outer zones, the middle defenses, and then approached the inner regions where the Empire kept its most valuable assets. Every radar sweep, every sensor scan confirmed the impossible. No shields had slowed it, no mines had detonated, no turrets had fired. It was as if the ship existed in a reality slightly different from the one the Empire controlled. Officers could only stare in disbelief, and for the first time in centuries, the notion that humans might be capable of real power was no longer theoretical. In the midst of the panic, some voices called for immediate action: fire upon the ship, destroy it before it reaches anything important. But others hesitated. The reports were inconsistent. The ship seemed untouchable. Firing blindly could provoke consequences they could not predict. And deep down, even the most loyal officers began to wonder, what if this was more than a test? What if humans were already prepared for this moment, and every attempt to stop them would play into their plan? By the time the ship had passed through the patrol zone, a message had already reached the Empire's capital. The Emperor himself was informed, and the tone of the report made even the most confident aides uneasy. A human battleship has penetrated our defenses, it said simply, but the weight of that sentence could not be overstated. The Empire, the greatest power in the galaxy, had been breached by what it had always considered a minor civilization. The words alone caused tremors in the halls of power. For those watching from the front lines, it was both terrifying and humbling. The humans had done something no one thought possible. They had exposed the Empire's vulnerability, not with overwhelming force, but with precision, intelligence, and daring. And though the ship was gone from immediate view, the impact of its passage remained. Every officer, every soldier, and every scientist knew one thing for certain: the age of underestimating humans was over. And so, as the patrol ships regrouped and the command center buzzed with anxious orders, one thought dominated every mind. Humanity had shown the galaxy a glimpse of its power, and the Empire had no idea what to do next. It was the kind of moment that would be remembered for generations. A single human battleship moving silently and confidently through the Empire's most guarded borders had done what no one else could. It had proven that even the mightiest force in the galaxy could be challenged, and that sometimes the smallest civilization could change everything. The Empire's confidence had been shaken, and the first seeds of fear were already planted. In that instant, everyone understood. This was only the beginning. Humans were no longer just observers in the galaxy. They were participants capable of surprising even the most powerful civilizations. And the question that echoed through every chamber, every ship, and every mind was simple yet terrifying. How did a human battleship pass through? It was a question without an answer. For now. Inside the heart of the Empire, in the grand council chambers where leaders and strategists gathered, panic was spreading like wildfire. The walls of the room were lined with holographic screens displaying endless streams of data from the outer patrol zones. Every officer was glued to their station, analyzing the reports, but none of the readings made sense. The humans had done the impossible. A single battleship, apparently unarmed or lightly armed, had penetrated defenses that the Empire believed were invincible. The first to speak was one of the senior generals, his voice loud and sharp. "This is not a drill. Every patrol sensor confirms it. A human ship moved through our defenses as if they didn't exist. How is that possible?" His words hung in the air unanswered because nobody had an explanation. The council had prepared for countless scenarios: rebel attacks, smuggling operations, even rogue scientists developing illegal technology. But this was beyond anything they had planned for. Some of the council members tried to stay calm, insisting it must be a mistake. Perhaps the sensors had misread the readings, or maybe the reports were exaggerated. But the more they looked, the more they realized the data was real. The human ship had been precise, deliberate, and completely undetected by the usual methods. It wasn't running away. It wasn't hiding. It was moving with confidence, almost as if it were meant to be there. And that realization made the room go silent for a moment. A younger officer, someone who had only recently joined the council, finally spoke up. "Sir, our defense records show that humans have never had the technology to cross even one layer of our outer shields. How could they have passed through all of them?" His question was met with grim looks. It was a question everyone wanted to ask, but no one wanted to hear the answer to. The implications were terrifying. Scientists were summoned to the chamber, carrying devices and consoles that displayed simulations of the ship's path. They tried to explain using every model known to the Empire. Maybe it used some unknown stealth technology. Maybe it had a new type of propulsion system. Maybe it had discovered a loophole in the Empire's defenses. But as each scientist spoke, the Council realized something uncomfortable. Nothing in the simulations matched the actual path the ship had taken. It had bypassed energy barriers, evaded tracking systems, and slipped through defenses without leaving a trace. Whispers began to spread among the council members. "What if humans have been experimenting in secret?" one of them said quietly. Another replied, "Or maybe they have allies we don't know about." But even as they speculated, nobody could find proof. All they had was a single undeniable fact. Humans had achieved the impossible. And the fear that grew from that fact was different from anything the Empire had felt before. The Emperor, who rarely showed emotion in public, was informed immediately. A concise report was brought to him. A human ship had penetrated the outer defenses, leaving no signs of conventional propulsion, no traces of stealth devices, and no clear purpose other than to move through Empire space. He read the data silently, his expression unreadable. But those who watched him closely noticed a subtle shift. The calm authority that had always been his signature was replaced by something else: concern. The Empire had faced threats before, but this was different. This was an unknown force, a reminder that even the mightiest empire could be challenged. The generals demanded action. They wanted to mobilize fleets to track, intercept, and destroy the human ship before it reached anything important. Orders were shouted, new patrols were launched, and transmission lines buzzed with frantic communication. But as each fleet moved into position, they found themselves unable to catch up. The ship didn't flee or hide. It moved with a steady, deliberate pace, confident that no one could stop it. And for the first time, the officers realized that brute force alone might not be enough. In the council chambers, an older strategist finally broke the silence. "We have underestimated them for too long," he said. His voice carried weight because he had studied humans for decades. "We believed they were primitive, scattered, and weak. We assumed they could never threaten us. But this is not a mistake. They have knowledge, skill, and courage we never imagined, and we ignored it." The room went quiet again. Nobody wanted to admit that they had been wrong, that the Empire's confidence in its superiority had been misplaced. But the evidence was undeniable. Humans had crossed lines that were considered untouchable, lines that had never been breached in the Empire's history, and the fact that it was done without immediate violence, without destruction, made it all the more unnerving. The ship had shown power, but it had not attacked. It had chosen its moment carefully, and that suggested intelligence and planning. Meanwhile, fleets stationed closer to the humans' projected path tried everything they could. Sensors scanned every frequency, every signal. Drones were deployed to follow the ship. Commanders tried to set traps using gravitational anomalies, energy nets, and even experimental weapons. But each attempt failed. The ship moved as if the obstacles didn't exist. Every failure only deepened the fear among the Empire's leaders. It was no longer just a question of a breach. It was a realization that humans were playing a different game, one the Empire had never prepared for. Reports from the outer patrols began to arrive with increasing urgency. Officers described seeing the ship glide silently past massive defense installations, passing through zones where no ship had ever survived. It didn't appear to be fast in the conventional sense, yet it moved with a speed that confounded calculations. Sensors failed to lock onto it, and communications with nearby ships were disrupted without explanation. Every update made the Empire's leaders more anxious. They had trained their lives to maintain order, to enforce control. But here was proof that someone else had control over the situation. Some of the council members argued for negotiation. Maybe humans were not hostile. Maybe this was a test or a warning. But most dismissed that idea immediately. The Empire had never encountered a civilization capable of such audacity. The instinct of the generals was to fight, to attack first and ask questions later. Yet even the bravest officers hesitated. There was a growing sense that attacking this ship could provoke consequences they could not predict. For the first time, the Council faced uncertainty on a scale it had never known. Amid the chaos, a group of intelligence officers began digging into historical records. They searched for any precedent, any event where humans had demonstrated abilities that might explain the ship's passage. Hours turned into days, but they found nothing recent that could shed light on the incident. Then, buried in old reports from centuries ago, they discovered references to early contact with humans, a warning that had long been ignored. One ambassador had written that humans were not to be underestimated, that their potential for strategy and warfare exceeded appearances. At the time, the Empire had dismissed it, but now the words resonated with new meaning. Humanity had quietly grown into something far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. By the end of the day, the council chambers were tense with a mixture of fear and fascination. The human ship was gone from immediate detection, but the impact of its passage remained. The Empire realized that its assumptions about the galaxy, about the humans, and about its own invincibility were flawed. A single vessel had challenged centuries of planning, and there was no clear answer for how to respond. In the silence that followed the storm of activity, the Council began to face a new reality. Humans were no longer a minor curiosity. They were capable, intelligent, and unpredictable. And the Empire, for all its strength, had been caught off guard. Every officer, every general, and every scientist knew that this incident was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of a much larger problem. The human ship had not destroyed anything. It had not attacked, nor had it claimed territory, yet its mere presence had shaken the Empire to its core. It was proof that humans had the ability to challenge even the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. And that thought, more than any weapon or strategy, instilled fear. From that day forward, the councils would meet with a new sense of caution. Strategies would be reconsidered, defenses reviewed, and assumptions challenged. The human ship had changed the way the Empire saw the galaxy, and somewhere far away humans continued their work, unaware of the panic they had caused, yet confident in the power they had quietly built. The lesson was clear: never underestimate humanity. And as the council members left the chamber, their minds were filled with one unshakable question. If one human ship could pass through the Empire's greatest defenses, what else could humans do next? It was a question that would haunt them for a long time. The following days were unlike anything the Empire had ever faced. The human battleship that had passed through the outer defenses without resistance became the center of every discussion, every analysis, and every worry. Scientists, strategists, and officers worked around the clock, trying to understand how a single human ship could slip past what they had considered impenetrable. They combed through layers of sensor data, checked every surveillance feed, and recalculated every defense algorithm. And yet, with every new attempt to decode the mystery, the more confused they became. The first attempts at investigation were simple. Fleets were sent to follow the ship's last known path, hoping to intercept it before it disappeared entirely. Drones and scout ships moved in formation, scanning every angle, but the human battleship seemed to evade them effortlessly. It did not move like a conventional vessel, and every time the Empire thought they had locked onto it, the ship would disappear from their sensors, as if it had never been there at all. Officers and commanders stared at their screens in disbelief, whispering to each other that it was impossible. Yet the data did not lie. The humans had simply done what the Empire had been told was unthinkable. As fleets searched, scientists examined the small traces the ship left behind. There were no warp trails, no identifiable energy signatures, no residual heat or radiation that could reveal how it had traveled. The only evidence was a faint, unusual pattern of particles that did not match any known propulsion system. Some theorized that humans had discovered a method of moving through space that the Empire had never even imagined. Others thought it might be a new kind of stealth, one that rendered a ship invisible not just visually but in every detectable way. And as the theories grew, so did the sense of fear. Officers whispered about what this could mean. Could humans have been secretly experimenting for centuries, building technologies far beyond what anyone believed? Could they be hiding entire fleets on distant worlds waiting for the right moment? These ideas, once dismissed as fantasies, now seemed possible. Even the most skeptical generals could not shake the feeling that they were facing something unpredictable, something that had been underestimated for far too long. Amid this chaos, an intelligence team suggested a new approach. Instead of chasing the ship, they would study the areas it had passed through for anomalies. Perhaps the humans left subtle clues behind, something only detectable by close examination. Teams were sent to survey abandoned patrol stations, derelict satellites, and hidden outposts along the path. They scanned everything, trying to find a hint of the humans' methods. But what they discovered only deepened the mystery. The particle traces were faint, almost imperceptible, and their structure did not resemble anything in the Empire's records. For the first time, the Empire's top scientists admitted that humans might be using physics in a way no one had yet understood. The council chambers were filled with tension. Maps of the galaxy were projected in holographic displays, showing the human ship's impossible path. Lines of energy barriers, sensor networks, and defense satellites that had been considered unbreakable were crossed effortlessly. Generals shouted over each other, demanding explanations, demanding immediate action. Some argued for sending fleets to strike the humans before they had a chance to prepare further. Others cautioned restraint, worried that rushing into conflict could expose more vulnerabilities. The disagreement revealed a deeper problem. The Empire had no playbook for dealing with humans who were unpredictable, intelligent, and capable of outmaneuvering their greatest defenses. Meanwhile, stories began to circulate among the patrol officers. Those who had first seen the human ship described it as sleek, almost elegant, moving with a confidence that made it seem alive. Some even said it seemed to anticipate their moves, dodging scanning beams and patrol drones as though it could read their intentions. Whether true or not, these stories spread quickly, adding a sense of awe and fear. Humans were no longer just a curiosity. They were becoming a legend, the kind of tale that officers whispered about in mess halls and sleeping quarters late at night. Back in the council chambers, one senior strategist raised a point that caused a stir. "This is not just a technological challenge," he said. "This is a psychological one. They are showing us that we cannot control or predict them. That is far more dangerous than any weapon." The room fell silent. He was right. The human ship had not attacked. It had not destroyed anything. Its victory lay in the very fact that it moved freely where none should, that it revealed the Empire's defenses to be fallible. Humans had challenged the Empire's sense of absolute power, and that challenge was more terrifying than any direct assault. As scientists debated theories, fleets continued their patrols. They discovered that wherever the human ship had passed, anomalies appeared. Sensor readings fluctuated unpredictably, energy shields behaved strangely, and communications were often disrupted without explanation. It was as if the humans had left subtle fingerprints, hints of something the Empire could not yet understand. Some officers feared that these anomalies were intentional, designed to confuse and demoralize the Empire. Others speculated that they were accidental, side effects of a technology far beyond their understanding. Either way, the effect was the same. Unease spread through every command station, and every officer knew that the humans were something different, something capable of shaping the rules of engagement in ways the Empire had never experienced. The more the Council tried to make sense of it, the clearer it became that the human ship was not just a piece of technology. It represented strategy, intelligence, and daring. The Empire's fleets were trained to fight battles, to enforce control, to follow orders. Humans, it seemed, were thinking differently. They were not bound by the rules the Empire assumed applied to all civilizations. They were unpredictable, flexible, and remarkably capable. And that realization struck fear into the hearts of those who believed themselves invincible. At the same time, intelligence officers worked through old archives, looking for anything that might explain humanity's sudden emergence as a threat. They dug through centuries of reports, old ambassador notes, and long-forgotten communications. Somewhere deep in the records, they found a warning that had been dismissed long ago. Early diplomats had reported that humans were clever and capable of unexpected feats. At the time, the Empire had laughed at the suggestion. Humans were small, scattered, and primitive compared to the vastness of the Empire. But now that old warning had new meaning. The humans had grown quietly, silently, mastering skills and knowledge that no one had noticed. And the warning that had been ignored now echoed ominously through the council chambers. Never underestimate humanity. The human ship's path continued to puzzle the Empire. It had passed through multiple layers of defenses without setting off a single alarm strong enough to allow interception. Every attempt to chase it failed. Fleets moved into formation, only to find the ship gone from every sensor. Drones returned with no data. It was as if the ship could slip in and out of space itself, moving in ways that seemed impossible according to the Empire's understanding of physics. Scientists were forced to admit that they were witnessing something entirely new, an application of science they could not yet comprehend. Amid all this chaos, whispers of fear spread through the officers and generals. Could humans have more ships? Could there be weapons they had not yet seen? Could humanity be preparing for something much larger? These questions haunted the Empire. They realized that their sense of security had been shattered, and nothing in their archives could fully prepare them for what might come next. By the end of the third day, the Council reached a tentative conclusion. Humans had become a force the Empire could not ignore. They were clever, strategic, and unexpectedly powerful. The passage of a single ship through the Empire's defenses had not only exposed vulnerabilities in technology, but also in thinking. Every commander understood that from this moment on, humans could no longer be treated as a minor, backward civilization. They were now a challenge, a puzzle, and a threat all at once. In quiet moments, officers reflected on what they had witnessed. Some admitted that the humans had something the Empire could not match: creativity, courage, and the ability to act outside expected patterns. Others feared what that meant for the future. The human ship had not destroyed, not attacked, and yet it had achieved what no fleet could. It had shaken the confidence of the greatest power in the galaxy. And for many, that was more frightening than any battle they had ever fought. The human battleship was gone from immediate view, but its impact remained. The Empire was forced to reconsider its strategies, its defenses, and even its assumptions about the universe. They had encountered a civilization that refused to be predictable, that defied expectation, and that could challenge the very notion of control. And as fleets regrouped, as scientists analyzed, and as generals argued, one truth became clear: humans had changed the rules. The story of that single human ship spread quietly at first, then loudly across the Empire's patrol stations and fleets. Every officer who had witnessed the impossible carried the tale, and every fleet commander knew that the age of underestimating humanity was over. What had started as disbelief had turned in. The Empire had spent days trying to understand what had happened. The human battleship's sudden appearance and effortless passage through the outer defenses had left fleets frustrated, scientists baffled, and generals uneasy. Every effort to track it had failed. Every theory seemed insufficient. And now, in the quiet hours of the council chambers, a discovery was made that shook everyone even more deeply than the ship itself. An old archivist, someone who had spent decades cataloging centuries of imperial records, had found a reference that had long been forgotten. It was buried in a collection of diplomatic messages, communications that had been archived and largely ignored because they were thought irrelevant. The message was from an ambassador who had interacted with humans long ago, centuries before the Empire had considered them a serious threat. Most of these early communications had been dismissed as naive or exaggerated. But this particular note was different. Its words carried a warning that the Empire had ignored at its own peril. The archivist had brought the message to the Council's attention, and when it was read aloud, silence fell over the room. The note described humans as clever, resourceful, and capable of surprising even the most powerful civilizations. The ambassador had urged caution, writing that humans were not to be underestimated, and that they possessed qualities that could challenge the Empire if provoked. At the time, the Empire had ignored the warning, believing humans to be primitive and weak. But now, after the appearance of the battleship, those words felt like a prophecy being fulfilled. The Council debated the meaning of the warning. Some argued that it was only a diplomatic exaggeration, a way to make humans seem more dangerous than they really were. Others insisted that it should be taken seriously, that the events of the last few days proved the humans' capability. Every officer in the chamber could feel the tension rising. It was not just about a single ship anymore. It was about centuries of assumptions being proven wrong in an instant. Generals demanded immediate action. "We cannot wait for them to strike again," one of them said sharply. "They have already shown they can bypass our defenses. We must find them before they reach critical positions." But the council was divided. Some cautioned that acting rashly could lead to disaster. No one knew where the humans were hiding, what technology they had developed, or what strategy they were following. The Empire had always relied on order, control, and predictability. Humans had proven that none of these assumptions applied. As debates continued, intelligence officers worked to trace the battleship's path. They analyzed the slight anomalies it had left in sensor grids and energy fields, hoping to find a clue. Every analysis was painstaking, every calculation precise. But the ship had been meticulous. It had left no clear trail, only subtle distortions that could be interpreted in multiple ways. It was as if the humans were intentionally teaching the Empire a lesson, showing them that their understanding of space and strategy was limited. The archivist who had discovered the old warning offered another insight. "We dismissed them long ago," he said. "We thought humanity was small, scattered, and unimportant. But this message proves that even back then, someone saw the potential. They were not wrong. We were simply blind." The council listened quietly. For decades, they had relied on data, observations, and assumptions. Now those tools were inadequate. Humans had demonstrated a level of ingenuity and skill that no report or model could capture. Meanwhile, fleets continued to patrol, scanning the borders and searching for any sign of the humans' next move. Officers reported strange readings, sensor anomalies that seemed almost deliberate, areas of space where communication signals fluctuated without reason, and energy patterns that defied standard physics. Some officers whispered to each other that humans might be experimenting with ways to manipulate space itself, moving through areas that the Empire considered untouchable. The possibility was terrifying. The human ship had not attacked, and yet it had already changed the Empire. Strategies were being rewritten, defenses were being re-examined, and centuries of overconfidence were being challenged. The archivist's discovery had given the Council a new perspective. The warning from the past was not about a single ship. It was about a species, a civilization that had grown quietly and deliberately, waiting for the right moment to reveal its strength. As discussions continued, a historian in the council chambers reminded everyone of another forgotten detail. Humans had survived countless hardships on their own world. They had faced environmental disasters, internal conflicts, and challenges that would have destroyed lesser civilizations. Yet they had persisted, learned, and grown stronger. Their survival instinct, combined with intelligence and creativity, made them unpredictable. They were not just another species in the galaxy. They were one capable of adapting in ways the Empire had never seen. The Council began to consider what this meant for their own strategies. The human ship had been a warning, not a threat. Its calm passage through defenses showed power, but it had not caused destruction. That suggested humans were deliberate, calculating, and willing to act in ways that the Empire could not anticipate. Every general, every strategist, and every intelligence officer realized that they were dealing with a civilization that thought differently from any they had encountered. Some voices in the council urged caution. "We must not provoke them," one officer said. "They are clever. If we act too aggressively, we may trigger something we cannot control." Others argued that hesitation could be dangerous. "If they have one ship, they may have more," another officer said. "We cannot afford to wait. We must understand them before they decide our fate." The debate continued, reflecting the tension and uncertainty that now dominated the Empire's leadership. In the quiet corners of the council chambers, a few officers reflected on the human ship itself. It had moved with precision and confidence. It had bypassed layers of defenses that the Empire believed were impenetrable, and it had done so without firing a single shot. That calm, deliberate approach suggested intelligence, patience, and careful planning. Humans were not reckless. They were measured, strategic, and unafraid to challenge assumptions. That understanding, more than anything else, sent shivers through the council. Outside the council chambers, fleets continued their patrols, scanning for any sign of the humans' next move. Every ship reported anomalies, strange patterns, and disruptions that could not be explained by known technology. Engineers and scientists worked tirelessly, trying to decode the mysteries, but each new discovery only raised more questions. The Empire had always relied on knowledge and predictability, but humans had proven that not all knowledge could be predicted or controlled. In the archives, the old ambassador's warning was discussed over and over. "They warned us centuries ago," the archivist said, "and we ignored it because we believed in our superiority. Now we see that their caution was wise. Humanity has been preparing quietly, patiently for something we never understood. The words resonated through the council chambers. The Empire realized that this was more than a technological problem. It was a challenge to their assumptions, their confidence, and their understanding of the galaxy itself. As days turned into nights, the Council slowly began to accept a new reality. Humans were not just capable of surprising the Empire, they were capable of changing the rules entirely. The warning from the past had been ignored, and now the consequences were clear. A single human ship had demonstrated skill, strategy, and intelligence far beyond what the Empire had anticipated. That realization was humbling, even for those who had long believed in the Empire's invincibility. Some officers suggested reaching out diplomatically, trying to communicate with the humans. But even this idea was controversial. How could the Empire approach a civilization that had already shown it could outmaneuver them? Would contact be safe, or would it reveal further weaknesses? Every proposal was debated, every plan questioned. There was no certainty, only the understanding that the humans had changed everything. In the midst of all this, a quiet fear settled over the Empire. Humans had shown power without violence, confidence without confrontation, and intelligence without arrogance. They had moved through the Empire's most secure zones and left behind only questions, doubts, and warnings. And that, perhaps more than anything, was the most dangerous thing of all. The Empire realized that humanity was not just another species. They were a challenge, a mystery, and a force that could not be ignored. The discovery of the old warning had given the Council perspective, but it had also intensified the tension. Humans had been underestimated for centuries, and now the Empire had to confront the possibility that it was far behind in understanding them. The ship was gone, but its impact remained. The Empire's leaders knew that the next encounter would not be a surprise. They had been warned. And yet the fear of the unknown, combined with the knowledge of humanity's potential, made the future uncertain in ways no one could predict. By the end of the fourth day, the Council reached a sobering conclusion. Humans were clever, capable, and deliberate. Their technology, strategy, and intelligence were beyond what the Empire had expected, and the warning from centuries ago, once ignored, had proven true. The Empire had underestimated humanity at its own. The days after the discovery of the old warning passed in tense silence. The Empire had tried to regroup, to study the anomalies, to search for any sign of the human ship, but it remained elusive. Officers and generals alike had begun to realize that they were no longer dealing with just a single incident. Humanity had made its presence known, and the implications were far greater than a single ship passing through defenses. The human battleship had left the Empire shaken, unsure and anxious for the first time in centuries. Then, without warning, the humans made their next move. It did not come in the form of a fleet, nor as an attack, nor even as a visible threat. Instead, it arrived as a broadcast, a signal sent across the Empire's communication networks. At first, officers assumed it was a technical error or interference from some distant system. But when the transmission repeated itself on multiple channels, it became clear. This was deliberate. Someone was sending a message, and it was meant for the Empire. The content of the transmission was simple yet chilling. A human voice, calm and deliberate, spoke across the networks. It was clear, confident, and entirely composed. There were no threats, no demands, no aggression. Yet the message carried a weight that was impossible to ignore. "Your borders are not walls. They are invitations," the voice said. The words repeated across the Empire stations, cutting through the usual noise of reports and alarms. Officers listened in disbelief, trying to understand what it meant. It was not just a statement, it was a warning, a lesson, and a declaration all at once. The council chambers erupted with debate. Some generals argued that the message was a provocation, a deliberate taunt meant to test the Empire's resolve. Others suggested it was a warning, a sign that humans were willing to act strategically rather than with immediate force. The calmness of the transmission was unsettling. The human voice had conveyed confidence, intelligence, and control. It showed that the humans were not reckless, that they had thought through every move, and that they understood the power dynamics of the galaxy far better than the Empire had assumed. As the Council analyzed the broadcast, a holographic projection suddenly appeared. On every communication screen, the image of the human battleship was visible, hovering above one of the Empire's moons. The ship was still, unarmed and entirely unthreatening in appearance. Yet its presence alone was a statement. It had moved undetected through the Empire's defenses, and now it was demonstrating control over its location and timing. It did not attack. It did not fire. It simply existed as if to say, "We are here, and we can do what we choose." The impact of the broadcast was immediate. Fleet commanders reported unease among their crews. Officers whispered to each other that humans were unlike any species they had ever encountered. They had shown the ability to bypass the Empire's strongest defenses, and now they were demonstrating psychological power. The calm, deliberate communication was more effective than any weapon. It made the Empire question its assumptions, its strategies, and even its confidence in its own authority. Scientists and engineers scrambled to analyze the projection of the ship. Every detail, every angle was scrutinized for clues. Was it using stealth technology? Did it have hidden weapons? Could it disappear at will? Every observation led to more questions than answers. The Empire's greatest minds had studied humans for centuries, but they had never imagined such deliberate intelligence and control. The human battleship had become more than a ship. It was a symbol, a demonstration of capability, and a reminder of the Empire's limitations. As the Council debated, intelligence officers uncovered another layer to the broadcast. The transmission had subtle codes embedded in it, patterns that suggested the humans were not only sending a message, but also testing the Empire's ability to interpret and respond. Every repetition, every pause, and every detail seemed carefully designed. It was as if the humans were teaching the Empire a lesson. They were unpredictable, deliberate, and capable of strategy beyond what the Empire had considered possible. Some voices in the Council called for immediate retaliation. They argued that any delay would embolden the humans, that the Empire needed to respond with force to assert control. But even the most aggressive generals hesitated. The humans had shown restraint, precision, and intelligence. Attacking the ship without understanding the consequences could provoke a response far worse than the Empire could handle. For the first time, the Empire faced a strategic dilemma it could not solve with force alone. In the quiet corners of the chambers, officers reflected on what the broadcast meant for the Empire's understanding of humanity. This was no random act. It was not an accident. The humans were demonstrating control, intelligence, and awareness of the Empire's psychology. They understood how to make their presence felt without using violence. They had created fear, respect, and uncertainty with a single message. The realization was unsettling. Humans had learned the power of subtlety, patience, and psychological strategy, skills that the Empire had rarely faced. Meanwhile, fleets continued their patrols, scanning for any sign of the human ship. Every fleet reported anomalies, energy readings that did not match known technology, communications that fluctuated unexpectedly, and sensor patterns that seemed almost intelligent in their unpredictability. Engineers worked tirelessly to decode these anomalies, but every discovery only highlighted the humans' ingenuity. The ship was not just a piece of technology. It was a tool for communication, a demonstration of strategy, and a warning that the Empire could not ignore. The Council realized that the broadcast was a turning point. The humans had chosen the method, timing, and content of the message carefully. They had demonstrated power, intelligence, and control without firing a shot. It was a lesson in strategy, showing that humans could achieve their objectives without direct confrontation. Every general and strategist understood that the Empire's assumptions about strength, control, and predictability were flawed. Humans had demonstrated a new kind of power, one that combined intelligence, patience, and precise action. As the days passed, discussions turned to predictions. What would humans do next? Would they strike? Would they reveal more ships? Would they attempt diplomacy or continue to demonstrate their abilities in subtle ways? No one had the answer. The Empire had faced challenges before, but never a civilization that combined ingenuity, strategy, and restraint so effectively. The human battleship was not just a vessel. It was a symbol of the potential of an entire species. The impact of the broadcast spread beyond the council chambers. Officers at every level of the Empire began to reconsider their assumptions. Fleet commanders discussed the psychological power of the humans, and engineers speculated about their technology. Every officer who had seen the broadcast or analyzed its details carried a mix of awe, fear, and respect. Humans had changed the rules of engagement without firing a single shot. And the lesson was clear. The Empire could no longer act as if humans were weak or predictable. For the first time, the Empire faced a civilization that could operate outside expected patterns. Humans had demonstrated intelligence, precision, and patience, and they had done so in a way that forced the Empire to confront its own limitations. The broadcast was more than a warning. It was a challenge. It demanded recognition, respect, and caution. The human ship had not attacked, yet it had achieved something far more powerful. It had shifted the balance of perception in the galaxy. As the Council worked to understand the implications, fleets continued to patrol the borders, scanning every sector. Officers noted that wherever the human ship had passed, anomalies persisted. Sensor fluctuations, subtle energy distortions, and areas where communications were unreliable. Scientists theorized that the humans might be using advanced technology to manipulate space itself, creating patterns that were deliberate but difficult to interpret. The possibilities were unsettling. The humans were not only capable of bypassing defenses, they were capable of controlling perception and strategy in ways the Empire could not fully predict. The Council recognized that the next steps would require careful planning. Diplomacy, surveillance, and intelligence gathering had to be prioritized. Force alone would not be enough. The humans had demonstrated the ability to act without aggression, to teach lessons without conflict, and to control outcomes through precision and patience. The Empire had been forced to acknowledge that a single ship, a single broadcast, could challenge centuries of power and influence. In the quiet moments after the broadcast, officers reflected on the significance of what had occurred. The human ship had moved through defenses, broadcast a clear message, and left without firing a single shot. Yet the impact was undeniable. Fear, respect, and uncertainty now dominated the council chambers and fleet stations. The Empire had been confronted by a civilization that was clever, patient, and capable of strategy beyond what they had imagined. The realization settled in slowly but firmly. Humans were no longer a minor species to be ignored or underestimated. They had demonstrated intelligence, restraint, and the ability to control events without direct confrontation. The Empire understood that its future interactions with humans would need to be cautious, deliberate, and respectful of their capabilities. The broadcast had not only communicated a message, it had changed the Empire was no longer the same. The passage of a single human battleship, followed by its calm and deliberate broadcast, had shaken centuries of confidence. The council chambers were tense, filled with generals, strategists, and intelligence officers who could not stop thinking about the humans' capabilities. Every fleet, every defense station, and every officer now understood that humanity was unpredictable, intelligent, and capable of challenges the Empire had never anticipated. The days following the broadcast were a mix of preparation, analysis, and quiet unease. Fleets were mobilized not to attack, but to monitor, to study, and to understand. Every sector where humans had been or might go was under observation. Patrols reported anomalies that could not be explained by conventional technology. Sensor grids fluctuated in strange patterns. Communications behaved unpredictably. And officers began to whisper among themselves about the humans' ingenuity, their patience, and the careful planning behind every action. In the council chambers, debates continued. Some generals still called for a show of force, arguing that the Empire needed to assert control before humans grew bolder. Others, more cautious, warned that aggression could provoke a response the Empire could not handle. One senior strategist stood and addressed the council with calm authority. Humans are not like the others we have faced. They think differently. They plan differently. They operate outside our assumptions. If we act without understanding, we risk everything. His words hung in the air. For the first time, the council realized that they were not merely dealing with a species. They were facing a civilization with vision, strategy, and courage. Meanwhile, scientists continued to study the anomalies left by the human battleship. They found traces of energy fields, subtle distortions in space, and patterns that suggested technology far beyond anything previously documented. Every discovery raised more questions than it answered. The humans had shown a mastery over the universe's laws, bending them in ways the Empire's brightest minds could barely comprehend. The more the Empire tried to analyze and replicate their methods, the more they realized that humans were not just clever, They were revolutionary. Amid all this, fleets observed distant systems where humans might have bases or ships. Reports came back of rapid construction, strategic placement of resources, and unexpected activity. Humans were not attacking, not demanding, not asserting dominance in the usual sense, but they were preparing. And the Empire knew it. Every fleet commander understood that what they were witnessing was not chaos, it was strategy. Humans were patient. They were deliberate. They were teaching the Empire a lesson in restraint, timing, and calculated power. The council chambers grew more reflective with each passing day. Officers began to speak not only of defense but of understanding. They debated how to communicate, how to interpret human strategy, and how to anticipate their moves without aggression. The broadcast had shown that humans could influence the Empire without force. The lessons were psychological, strategic, and in many ways subtle. The Empire realized that power was not only measured by fleets or weapons, but also by intelligence, creativity, and the ability to act unpredictably. Some officers suggested reaching out diplomatically, proposing careful communication with humanity. Others hesitated, wary of revealing weakness or miscalculating. The memory of the broadcast loomed large. The humans had demonstrated control, patience, and intelligence in a way that no attack ever could. Diplomacy now required respect and careful consideration, because humanity was not reckless. They had proven they could act deliberately and effectively, even when the Empire's full power was arrayed against them. Outside the council chambers, fleets continued to monitor and patrol, recording every anomaly, every fluctuation, and every signal. Engineers worked day and night, trying to understand the energy signatures left behind by the human ship. The more they studied, the more they realized the humans were not only capable of technology, they were capable of strategic brilliance. The ship had not attacked, yet it had achieved more than any fleet could. It had forced the Empire to reconsider itself. For the officers and strategists of the Empire, a profound lesson emerged. Humans were patient, clever, and willing to act in ways the Empire could not anticipate. They could strike with precision, they could influence perceptions, and they could challenge centuries of assumptions. The Empire had long relied on control, predictability, and superior force. Humanity had shown that these qualities alone were no longer enough. Intelligence, timing, creativity, and adaptability were equally powerful, and humans had them in abundance. The passage of time revealed another striking fact. Humans were not motivated by arrogance or conquest. Their movements, their signals, and their strategies suggested a species that valued preparation, patience, and careful planning. They were strong not because they dominated others, but because they understood themselves and their surroundings. The Empire realized that strength could be subtle, indirect, and deliberate. The human ship, in its calm and precise actions, had demonstrated that more effectively than any fleet ever could. The Council began to draft new strategies, not for immediate conflict, but for observation and understanding. They proposed careful intelligence gathering, study of human behavior, and analysis of strategic patterns. The humans had demonstrated that they could act in ways that challenged assumptions. To respond effectively, the Empire had to think differently, to adapt, and to recognize that a direct approach might be less effective than one that anticipated human strategy. Meanwhile, humanity's message continued to echo in the minds of the Empire's leaders. Your borders are not walls, they are invitations. The statement was simple yet profound. It was a warning, a lesson, and a challenge. The humans had shown that strength was not always visible. Sometimes it was the ability to influence, to act with intelligence, and to control perception. The Empire had been forced to confront this truth in the wake of a single ship and a calm broadcast. Officers reflected on the broader implications. Humanity was no longer just a species to monitor or underestimate. They were a civilization capable of thought, strategy, and influence that rivaled the greatest powers the Empire had ever known. Every fleet, every outpost, every command station understood that the humans could act in ways that were precise, deliberate, and effective without resorting to violence. The Empire had faced threats before, but never one like this. Even the Emperor, who rarely showed emotion, acknowledged the shift. Reports from fleets, intelligence officers, and scientists all pointed to the same conclusion. Humans were capable of challenging the Empire in ways that had been unimaginable. The calm, calculated approach of the human battleship had revealed gaps in knowledge, understanding, and strategy that the Empire had taken for granted. The realization was humbling. As the days turned into weeks, the Empire's response became more thoughtful. Fleets were deployed for observation rather than attack. Engineers studied human technology and strategy with renewed curiosity. Strategists debated possibilities, always mindful that humans were patient, deliberate, and capable of subtle influence. The Council understood that humanity was not just powerful. It was clever, adaptable, and willing to act in ways that challenged expectations. At the same time, the humans' actions remained measured. The ship was never aggressive, the broadcasts never threatening, yet every interaction had a profound impact. Humans had demonstrated restraint, precision, and strategic brilliance. Their presence alone had altered the Empire's perception of power, control, and influence. The Empire realized that humanity's greatest strength lay not in weapons, fleets, or dominance, but in intelligence, strategy, and patience. Finally, the Empire began to accept a new reality. Humans were no longer a minor species to dismiss. They were capable, deliberate, and intelligent. They had demonstrated mastery over strategy, technology, and perception. They could act without aggression and still change the course of events. The Empire understood that the lessons from the first human battleship and its calm broadcast would shape all future interactions. The council chambers, once filled with confidence and certainty, were now filled with reflection, analysis, and cautious respect. Every officer knew that humanity had revealed a new kind of power, one that combined intelligence, patience, and strategy. The human ship had not attacked, yet it had achieved what no fleet ever could. It had forced the Empire to see itself differently, to recognize its assumptions, and to understand that true strength could be subtle, indirect, and deliberate, and so, the Empire faced the future with a mixture of caution, respect, and curiosity. Humanity had passed through its greatest defenses, delivered a message that challenged assumptions and demonstrated control without violence. The lesson was clear. The age of underestimating humans was over. From this moment forward, every strategy, every fleet deployment, and every decision would have to account for a species that was clever, patient, and capable of thinking beyond the expected. The human battleship had disappeared once more, but its presence lingered. The Empire had learned that strength was not always measured in firepower, numbers, or dominance. Sometimes it was measured in intelligence, strategy, and restraint. The humans had shown that one ship, one careful action, and one delib